Merry Steam Next Fest, everyone, the most wonderful time of the year. Today we're looking at 10 standout demos from the recent Steam Next Fest event that ran from June 19th to the 26th of 2023. Over the course of Next Fest, I played 31 demos that I thought looked cool. These are the 10 that stood out the most to me, ordered from the ones I'm least excited about to the ones I'm most excited about. Let's get to it. Starting off the list at number 10, we have Ebenezer in the Invisible World, a Metroidvania adventure platforming game. If your first thought is Ebenezer, like Scrooge from A Christmas Carol, it'd be funny if someone made an action-y video game about him. Well, you're gonna want to sit down. That's exactly what this is. The game starts off with a very anime visual novel story sequence where it establishes that Ebenezer Scrooge has learned the error of his ways thanks to the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. You know, Charles Dickens' The Christmas Carol. After the canonical events of that story, we finally get to figure out what happened next. Scrooge is visited by a sea captain ghost named Eric who needs his help. Apparently the whole deploy ghosts to show Christmases of different eras bit is a common tactic used to turn bad people good. But it backfired. Oh no. An evil spirit intervened when they tried it on someone named Casper. Casper lived his whole life trying to achieve something evil, and the ghost of Christmas future showed him finally achieving his goal, only to drop dead immediately after. The moral of the story? Don't waste your life developing evil devices when you can go outside and ice skate and eat Christmas goose or whatever. But something went wrong with Casper's redemption arc. Another evil spirit got to him and said, hey, you saw the finished thing in the vision. Now you can use that info to change the future and make the evil thing now. Bahaha, evil laughter. And that's where Scrooge comes in. You need to go out and fight that somehow. Listen, it was a very long sequence of Christmas Carol fanfiction that kind of blew my mind and made it hard to pay attention to all the little details. Perhaps even more bizarre than the premise of the game is that it's absolutely gorgeous and so intricately crafted. From the cutscene art to the in-game character design to the animations to the amazing backdrops, so much love and care has been put into this thing, it almost makes me feel guilty for being so put off by the whole what happened after Christmas Carol's Scrooge as an action hero premise. That being said, I have no idea if the idea is supposed to be kind of tongue-in-cheek, like, haha, someone had this crazy idea and we all laughed and then we made it. Or if it's sincere in its desire to dive deeper into the world in this medium. But if there is supposed to be humor in the concept, it is very dry and indiscernible. And, like, I don't want to rag on it too much. By all accounts, this is a very well-made thing, and if anyone was passionate about the story being told, or think this is a really clever, interesting take on things, I could not be happier. That's great, and I think you'll love this, and I love when video games find their audience, even if that audience isn't me. I just really wanted to highlight what I personally feel is a really dumb and silly idea, specifically because it contrasts so extremely with an immaculate amount of polish, care, and detail. Like, how do you not talk about this? And there's a morbid part of me that loves how much I hate this concept. Part of me likes the anger that wells up in me whenever Scrooge delivers any lines of heroic best guy ever dialogue, or whenever another stupid ghost appears and explains why they're being included in the story about some other guy turning evil and being visited by unrelated Christmas ghosts. I might actually have to play this game when it comes out just because I want to feel. And as a Metroidvania platformer, it was competent. It does all the things well enough. Nothing stands out as being bad about it, but without the phenomenal art and batshit insane premise, I don't think it'd stand out on gameplay alone. But that premise, though. Anyway, that's Ebenezer in the Invisible World. It's the one game on this list that I think really stood out to me for reasons other than I really liked it, but I had to talk about it. Thank you for letting me talk about it. Number 9 on the list is Laika Aged Through Blood, another 2D platforming game with absolutely gorgeous visuals. The genre of the game is, according to the Steam store, a Motorvania? What's that, you would rightfully ask? Well, put simple, it's like a Metroidvania game, but instead of running and jumping, you drive around on a motorcycle, very much like Trials HD. But you may be saying a big part of Metroidvanias are the enemies. Are there enemies? Well, yes there are, and this is where the idea gets truly wild. First of all, enemies all have guns and will shoot at you, and then you can block the bullets with your motorcycle by positioning it between you and the bullets, using the Trials-like mechanic of leaning the bike back and forward. Next, you can parry bullets. If a bullet is about to hit you, you can press a button to deflect it back at the guy that fired it. However, you can only do this once before you need to recharge this ability. How do you recharge? By successfully completing a full forward flip, obviously. Going even a step further, you have a gun and can just shoot people. As you fly through the air, you can hold the button to go into bullet time, which slows everything down, allowing you to aim a shot and pull the trigger. Similar to the bullet deflection, you can only do this twice before you need to recharge, which you do by executing a full backflip. So, to recap, you're driving through levels on a motorcycle, going off jumps, blocking bullets with your motorcycle before deflecting them back at people, and slowing down time to shoot at others before unslowing time and executing flips to recharge these abilities. Oh, and also the art and animation is amazing, and the story is actually very heavy and emotional and well done. If that sounds like a lot, it is. And that is both the best and worst part about this game. If you want something unique and different in the crowded Metroidvania genre where it's becoming harder and harder to stand out, this is it, 100%. This game is brilliant and all these crazy mechanics I described work. They work so well, it's kind of ridiculous. My only complaint is that the game is kind of exhausting. There's so much to keep track of at any given moment. You need to constantly be aware of your angle on the bike, both for blocking bullets and landing jumps. Sometimes while the camera is zooming in and out. You need to be aware of where all the enemies and bullets are coming from. You need to be aware of where you're going in the level design. You need to be aware of how many deflect charges you have. You need to be aware of how many bullets you have. And throughout all of this, if you lose track of one of those things, getting hit once or not landing a jump quite right is instant death. I had a blast playing this demo, but quit after an hour before finishing it simply because I needed a break from the extreme amount of focus that's required to do anything. And there's a part of me that wants to play more and see more and do more motorcycle combat stuff, because it is fun, but then there's another part of me that has yet to feel mentally ready to dive back into something that hardcore. And that's Laika Aged Through Blood. Brilliant game. No idea if it will or not, but this one should make some waves when it's released for being an amazingly executed, fresh take on the Metroidvania genre, with fantastic art, environment, and storytelling added on top of that, just as like an overachieving bonus. Maybe a little too hardcore for me. Actually, I kind of wish there was something like a limited rewind button to make it a little less punishing when you slightly botch a landing after blocking 3 bullets, killing 3 people via a combination of aiming and firing, deflecting bullets, and executing a series of back and front flips all in the span of a 3-second jump. But either way, it seems like it's shaping up very well, and I feel like you know if you need to check this one out or not. At number 8, we have Quasimorph, which is a 2D turn-based roguelite loot run game, kind of like Tarkov or other such games where your goal is to get a bunch of loot and live long enough to extract from a horrifically dangerous and difficult death zone. This isn't the first game in this genre to go 2D or use this overhead perspective, but as far as I know, this is the first one to go turn-based. But a quick note on that, I think when I say turn-based, people probably think of something like a JRPG or maybe XCOM, where a turn requires you to take an action and maybe instruct the game that your turn is done. That's not quite what this is. I'd almost say that this is more action-based than turn-based. Whenever you do a thing, whether that's moving on a map, looting a body or chest, or firing a weapon, it automatically progresses the turn system, and everything else gets an action as well. In a way, it's kind of like Super Hot in the sense that things only move when you move. If you don't do anything, neither does anyone else. And that turn system is kind of what sells me on this game. It allows you to take your time and meticulously plan things out one step at a time, which you absolutely need to do since this game is extremely harsh and unforgiving. That being said, when you're in a position where you don't need to be that careful, the game lets you speed along from one turn to the next without even really worrying about turns. I'm not sure if the entire game follows this pattern, but in the demo you're tasked with entering some kind of alien temple, activating 3 switches and escaping. While doing so, you encounter a variety of aliens with guns and clubs. If your gun breaks, you can loot an alien body to confiscate their weapon. If you get shot, your wounds will impact your abilities and can even get infected and kill you several turns later. If you eat bad meat, you could die from food poisoning. Okay, so there are a billion ways to die. Did I mention that this game is unforgiving? Ridiculously so, actually. I'm not sure if it's over the top impossible or if I just suck. I kind of suspect it's in the I suck category. But the thing is, it's all turn-based, so it should be the type of thing I can learn to get better at. And I want to learn. This is the type of game where I may actually watch some content on it when it comes out to learn some strategies and survival tips, because it's really rewarding whenever you have a halfway decent run. On top of that, it's got a nice 16-bit SNES style look to it. It plays nice, the sound design is excellent, and that is Quasimorph. Number 7 is Battle Shapers, a first-person shooter roguelite about fighting monsters in arena-like environments. Nothing about this game is mind-blowingly original, but it's ultimately comprised of a lot of elements that I thought worked well together. First, let's talk about the Cypher Cloud. This is your typical upgrade station. In addition to upgrading your weapons and health and baseline stats, you can also unlock new abilities that you just don't have in the early runs. Not at all the first game to do this, but I always like that more than just making numbers go up. Next, we have the Suit Station, where you assemble the foundation of your build that you'll expand upon within the run. Your build consists of 2 cores, a primary and a secondary. You have several available cores that you can apply to either slot. Applying one to the primary slot determines your main special ability. In this demo, we had 2 that we could use. One allows you to deflect bullets back at enemies by punching them. The other, and the one I very much preferred, turns your melee into a dash punch that charges up an overkill mode that Honestly, I'm not actually sure what that did. I just liked the dash and kept forgetting to punch bullets with the other build. Ignoring the fact that I wasn't totally sure what a lot of the keywords were in this limited demo, I like the system a lot. Making the cores dual use is a fun touch, and I always like games where you mix and match things together to create unique interactions. Solid system there. Next, let's talk about weapons. Again, nothing crazy unique here, but the weapons available in this demo were fun. Alt fires and charge modes and things that make them more interesting than your standard fare. I'm hoping there's a pretty good trickle of unlocks and variety in the main game. The demo only had a couple you could use, but they were good. Then let's get into the structure of a run. You start in a common area that seems to be the same every time. Seems like a way to give you a chance to swap out your primary weapon and apply a core upgrade before you get into the real meat of a run. After a few rooms, you get to select a level to enter, which is associated with a different boss. Not actually sure how different the levels are, as only one was available in the demo, but you can get a preview of some of the bosses. They seem kind of Mega Man-ish. The three we can see are Punch Guy, Lightning Guy, and Wind Guy. Not actually sure what happens when you beat one, or if there are others, since Lightning Guy is hard and I never beat him. Gameplay-wise, the game is solid. It's fast, shooting feels good. You have a dash move which helps you zip around the arenas quickly. It seems to really encourage dashing, jumping, using grenades, and taking advantage of everything you have to succeed. Ignoring all of the decision-y stuff that makes a roguelike really pop, this one was just fun to play. Last thing I want to touch on is the visuals. They remind me a little of Overwatch, but even more like a Saturday morning cartoon. The design of the bosses look very much like they're designed to translate into an action figure, which is, you know, like the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon or G.I. Joe. I say possibly dating myself, but it's a fun style. Do I think this is going to be the greatest game of all time and change the landscape of the roguelike genre? No, but I left my time with the demo really wanting access to the full game content, and the ability to start investing in upgrades and unlocks and stuff to even the odds a bit against that accursed Lightning Guy. Basically, after seeing everything the demo had to offer, I was still having fun and wanted to keep playing. Can't do much better than that in a demo. Anyway, Battle Shapers, I'm excited to play more of this one when it releases. Number 6 is Viewfinder, a game that I first learned about at the Day of the Devs event during Summer Games Fest and was really excited to get my mitts on, and was delighted to see it at Next Fest. The real simple elevator pitch of this game is that you're solving puzzles using a mechanic where you can take a photograph with stuff in it, align it with the environment you're in, then place the contents of that photograph into the environment. That's a terrible explanation, but I'm gonna run with it since you can see what I'm talking about on screen. Cool idea if it works, right? Well, it does work. It works well. And that's all well and good, but the demo isn't done there. It ramps up and says, look what else we can do, and starts giving you other artistic mediums to use. Paintings, cartoon frames, video game screenshots, just showing off a little. But then it gets to the big guns, which I imagine is the main portion of the game. You get a camera and can take your own photos. This allows you to duplicate things, take parts of the environment and realign them, and probably some other clever stuff that we're gonna have to figure out when the game comes out. There's not much to say about this game other than it's really cool and clever. I imagine the experience is gonna be a lot like Superliminal, where you figure out some clever way to work with the rules and mechanics of the game to solve a puzzle, then they add or change a rule and you have to figure that out. Rinse and repeat until you succeed, or your brain melts into a puddle. I'm really looking forward to it. I already know this is the type of game where I'm gonna plow through it in as few sittings as I can, depending on the amount of content there is in it. And I really can't imagine the game is gonna be that long, since I feel like it's gotta be incredibly difficult to make the things they're doing in this game actually work. How many crazy perspective mechanics could they actually pull off? I think we're gonna find out. But even if it ends up being somewhat short, I still think it'll be fun. I always hate being overly reductive, but in this case it seems really simple. If you enjoyed Superliminal, you probably already know that you have to play this. Kicking off the top half of the list, we have Sea of Stars. This is a game I heard about on Twitter. My feed often has wishlist or game posts from small indie devs where they show screenshots, sometimes briefly describe little mechanics in games. I think I'm part of a group or something, I don't remember. But this game caught my eye several months ago simply based on a screenshot. If you're a fan of pretty pixel art, you need to take a look at this game. It's absolutely spectacular looking. From the character design to the environments, both the level of detail and even the color palette, it looks so nice. But when I launched the demo and read through the tutorials, I started to get a little nervous. The battle tutorial in specific had so much going on in it. Timing stuff, action-based MP regeneration, attack boosting based on mana dropping in the battlefield, element-based blocking locks on enemies, vulnerabilities. As you read through it, it looks like a bunch of gibberish. And actually, as you dip your toe in and go through the first few fights, it seems like a bunch of gibberish, but I'm happy to say that by the end of the demo, I was fully on board with all the systems and was able to use them all to pretty good effect the last couple of big fights, including the big boss that closed out the demo with. So what else is going on? Fun writing. It's very much that style where it can kind of go back and forth between serious drama and character conflicts, then pivot to silly humor, both in terms of dialogue and visual gags. It seems like it's going to let you experience the highs and lows along with your characters. Then a big part of the demo is spent in a dungeon, filled with a bunch of enemies and a boss, as I'm sure you can imagine. But then also a healthy dose of environmental puzzle solving, and it's a solid puzzle. Kind of standard fare, flip switches in a specific order, find the correct path in a portally maze, blocky slide puzzle type things. Nothing that hasn't been done before, but I found the pacing to be really nice. Just the right amount of puzzling before finding enemies, just the right amount of enemies before getting back to the puzzles. And that kind of sums up this game, or at least a portion of it in the demo. It's a really nice balance of things. It does a lot of little things that have been done before, but hits the perfect amount of variety, keeping you doing new things from moment to moment, but pushing all of the elements far enough to make them meaningful. It all just works. The demo takes about an hour to get through. Like I said, it feels a little jarring at first since they dump you right into a bunch of gameplay systems that I imagine they'll trickle out in a tutorial sequence in the full game. But by the end of the demo, I was fully invested and had no idea where the time had gone. And again, the art. I'd almost play this game just for the art alone, but I feel like I don't need to harp on that since it's painfully obvious from all this footage. You can see what's going on here. Anyway, that's Sea of Stars. Really looking forward to diving back into this world when the game comes out. Number 4 is Avoid Hope, which is a puzzle platformer game that is a little difficult to describe just based on playing the demo, but I'm gonna try. In terms of gameplay and platforming, this is relatively straightforward. Jump from platform to platform, hit switches to open up other areas, push boxes around to gain access to different areas, figure out where to go, basic stuff, right? But there's something about the vibe of this game that just works so well for me. First of all, and this is something that's very much not going to make sense to a lot of people, but I feel like the people that know what I'm talking about will get this 100%. This game feels like an issue of Nintendo Power magazine. Obviously, the pixel graphics are retro-inspired, going for an 8-bit NES look, but like that version of it where it's how 8-bit games used to look in your memory, but it's actually a lot better. More detailed, cleaner, better animations and stuff. But on top of that, the way the level design is done, I can just see as a feature in Nintendo Power where a series of levels are completely mapped out in a big multi-page spread, showing little breakout sessions for smaller rooms off the main map, and a big central layout of the big city area. No idea if this resonates with anyone, but I always used to remember seeing those games in the magazine thinking they looked so cool, since mapping out a side-scrolling game makes it feel huge and neat. And then a lot of games that looked cool ended up not feeling very good to play, or were just bad for any number of other reasons. In the case of Avoid Hope, this is like one of those games, but it actually works. It feels great to play. The puzzling, at least in the early portions of the game and the demo, is relatively simple, yet makes exploring the environment fun and allows you to keep moving at a relatively brisk pace. And on top of all of that, there's actually an interesting premise at play in the game that I feel like you wouldn't find in the early days of the NES. There's a virus plaguing a town, but not a typical zombie thing. I get kind of an Invasion of the Body Snatchers vibe. The main start screen screams aliens at me. Then once you arrive at the main town, you'll run into other people, but they're like kind of in the background and don't react to you at all, making it seem like they're not really there, or perhaps you're not really there. There's something going on there. And as you run around town, occasionally shadowy figures will materialize to slowly chase you, where all you can do is run away or hit them with a flare gun to temporarily knock them down. I don't know, it's a neat vibe. The Nintendo Power stuff, the Body Snatcher stuff, the way it just feels nice and solid while not doing anything too crazy, it all hit just right for me, and I'm excited to play more of this one. I have absolutely no idea if the things that resonated with me will strike a chord with anyone else, but hey, this is my list. And on that list, at number 4, is Avoid Hope. Number 3 is a game that completely caught me off guard. It's a game called Station to Station, which is a little casual railroad puzzle game. I downloaded it purely because it looked like a little model train set, and I've always been fascinated by little model train sets despite never actually owning one. But it had a cute look, so why not take a look at it? The premise of this game is really simple. You have buildings on a map. Some buildings produce goods, some buildings require goods. Some do both and intake one type of good to produce another type. Your whole goal is to just link the buildings together in such a way that you're supplying everything with what it needs. So what's the challenge? Money is the most obvious one. Tracks cost money, longer routes cost more money, building bridges to go up steep cliffs or over previously laid tracks costs even more money, and don't run out of that. Second, you're limited by space. As you create your ever-growing web of tracks, you eventually start to run out of space to lay new tracks. There are ways to repurpose your old tracks and stations to create routes that meet the needs of multiple buildings, but it's still a logistical puzzle to make everything work. And that's the game. Whenever you fulfill the purpose of a building, whether it's a supply building or a demand building, the area around it colorizes itself and becomes alive again, which is a very satisfying visual effect. You also unlock new buildings and requirements as you progress through the levels that aren't there at the beginning of the level, making the puzzle a bit trickier as it forces you to be efficient with your space even when it doesn't look like you have to be. You also unlock little cards that allow you to build cheaper tracks, cheaper bridges, or get bigger bonuses from comboing stations to fulfill multiple purposes. It's definitely not a white knuckle puzzle. You do need to put some thought into things, and it's not that hard to mess things up irreversibly, forcing you to start the level over, but it's still a very casual and calm experience. Connecting things to other things is just satisfying. Anyway, I checked this one out purely for the visuals and ended up enjoying the gameplay a ton. I will absolutely be playing this game in its entirety when it comes out. Number 2 is a game called Ugly, which is yet another puzzly game that I almost didn't download since this Next Fest seemed flooded with puzzle games. But seeing as it's in the number 2 slot, I'm definitely glad I did. So what is this game and why is it worth playing? The main puzzle mechanic is actually pretty simple to explain. You are 2D platforming. As you do so, you have the ability to place out a little mirror crystal thing. Whenever you do, your reflection appears on the other side of the mirror. Like a good mirror, anything you do on your side of the reflection, it does on its side. Then, whenever you want, you can swap places with your reflection. You're subject to the laws of physics and gravity and reality as you move around, but your reflection doesn't have those same limitations. It just follows your lead, even if that means it's moving through walls or walking on air, and that is how you do the puzzle solving. The demo only provides a slim little look at the game, but puzzling was good. It all made sense. There were moments where the solutions weren't immediately obvious, but once they figured them out, they felt more like a revelation or an aha moment, rather than anything even remotely cheap. On its own, I feel like the mirror mechanic would get old fast, but they keep things interesting by putting you in control of the position and angle of the mirror, allowing you to place and retrieve it, very much pushing the depth of what you're being asked to do. That being said, I am still curious to see how far they push things and what other elements, if any, they introduce as it continues. Apart from the puzzling, this one also has a lot going on in the aesthetic department. The art style and animations are incredibly crisp and nice to look at, and the general vibe is certainly interesting in kind of a messed up way. Occasionally you'll unlock little memories that play out as little cartoon drawings that show what seems to be a fairly unhappy family, clearly saying something about something. And whatever happens at the very end of the demo, there's definitely a bit of a horror undertone to everything. I'm certainly intrigued to see where it's all going. But that is Ugly, a very clever and interesting puzzle platformer game. Finally, at number 1, we have the Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood from Devolver Digital, which is I don't actually know what kind of game this is. I think it's mostly a branching path story game. You're experiencing the story of a character and you influence that story by making dialogue choices. So obviously the first thing that's going to impact how good of a game this is will be how good or interesting the story is, and it does seem interesting. You play as an immortal witch who's been exiled to a lonely asteroid in space for predicting the end of the world with your tarot deck. And speaking of that tarot deck, naturally it's been confiscated since that's the reason you were exiled, but you will use it in flashbacks and stuff, and actually it's how you make dialogue choices. You'll occasionally do readings where you draw a card from the deck, I'm assuming at random, choose which part of the reading to apply it to, then choose one of several interpretations that card could lead to. And if you know the standard tarot deck at all, it's really interesting to see as they accurately represent the different cards and ways to interpret them. So that's a really neat way to do dialogue choices, and extra cool if you're into tarot. Anyway, that being said, you only get your standard tarot deck in a single flashback in the demo. Most of the demo takes place on the asteroid where you don't have it, so what do you do there? Well, that's a whole other cool part of this game. You build a deck, and not a tarot deck, mind you, a different type of deck that allows you to do readings in a new way. And there's a whole system at play for that. One by one, you craft individual cards of your deck. Each card will have 3 components on it, a background, a foreground, and a prop. And all of those components work together to define the meaning of the card. Whenever you select any of the components, you have to spend element points. Element points come in 4 varieties: earth, wind, fire, and water. Whenever you use the cards in readings, they'll generate an amount of these element points that you can then use to build additional cards. And I mean, that's kind of the hook. Because your cards are a combination of 3 different things, it feels like there are about 1 billion combinations of unique cards that you could build, and it seems like they all unlock different conversation options while you use them for interpretation. Obviously, I can't be completely sure of that since I don't know all of the inner workings of the mechanics, but it seems like that's what they're doing here. And that's fun. Branching conversation games are fun if the story is good, but even more fun is that it allows you to craft your own dialogue flavors via the very enjoyable card crafting mechanism, which I should mention is really personalized, since you design the visual appearance of the cards in addition to just picking the 3 components used in it. Do the visual layouts impact the meaning of the card? I didn't get the impression that they did. However, they do make it easier to make a connection with the cards and feel something whenever you randomly draw one. It's never, oh, that's that one wind card I found on the ground in level 2. It's a card that you designed, and thus I think it's going to be really easy to remember what happened whenever that card was drawn in the past. It's going to make it so it all feels really like your deck, and that's neat. On top of that, the story seems interesting. The Witch Coven seems to operate as a system of government that seems intriguing. You spend most of the demo talking to a huge demo that I'm sure will play out in some way. And the one flashback you go through in the demo implies that you weren't always a witch. At one point you were just a human who could predict the future with tarot cards, and you predict some fairly apocalyptic things. No idea what happened there. I have no idea if the full game is going to deliver, but it's Devolver, so that's usually a good sign. And there wasn't a single moment in the demo that wasn't intriguing and unique. I'm definitely excited to see where this one goes. And that's it. That's the list. 10 games from the recent Next Fest that I found to be particularly noteworthy. Please remember to add games to your wish list if you thought anything seemed interesting. Wishlisting a game is free and doesn't obligate you to buy it, and it helps the devs quite a bit, allowing them to gauge interest in the things they're making. And on that note, help me out. Like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. Also comments. Comments are huge. What are you looking forward to? Anything on this list? Anything not on this list? It's always fun to hear about what's on people's radars. And with that, as always, thanks very much for watching.